Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charlie Gregg, Director of Business Development for Ecoscape Permeable Pavement. I want to welcome you today to our Make the Case with Ecoscape Parking. I'm also joined on the call today by Austin Jones, our Director of Technical Services.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us.
So this is going to be about a 15-minute presentation, a brief overview on how Ecoscape permeable parking can help you mitigate the challenges that arise from stormwater ordinances from municipalities. And we're going to start out briefly and just tell you a little bit about what Ecoscape is. So Ecoscape is actually a patent pending and climate smart spray applied permeable concrete pavement system that was actually designed a few years back, and it was specifically designed to meet the challenges of one of our owners who was also developing uh, build to suit commercial tilt up buildings, and he was having a lot of challenges in the parking realm with bioretention and impervious surfaces, and so he adapted permeable concrete, and the permeable concrete that he adapted was a traditional ready mix permeable pavement, and it was not working. He was having failures, he was having raveling, he was having to rip out and replace. So he tasked us with creating an easier, better way of producing a commercially viable permeable concrete system, and that's where Ecoscape came into play. Ecoscape is really what we're trying to do is we're trying to help owners and specifiers mitigate the impact of stormwater ordinances. We're starting to see more and more ordinances and regulations come out relating to stormwater. They're charging you stormwater development fees up front when you're building your projects. They might be charging stormwater parcel taxes throughout the project, life of the project, where they're having you calculate your impervious square footage, and then they're charging you for the water that you're going to be producing that they have to process through their stormwater system. Now, what makes Ecoscape different than traditional methods you might see out there? We are the only permeable concrete pavement that is manufactured and installed completely on site. So what that means is you don't need a concrete batch plant and you don't need mixer trucks. So everything is done completely on site with our machine and our patented system. We're the only permeable concrete system that can be pumped. So no other permeable concrete out there in the market can be pumped. We're the only one that can be pumped in place. And really, something that's caught on in the last few years is the thought of climate smart technology. Both the ASCE and the AIA have adopted, the 2030 initiative, where they're starting to mandate products and systems that reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that are introduced into the overall project scope. And our system actually produces up to 61% less CO2 than a traditional ready mix concrete pavement application. And if you're interested in that, we can talk offline and we can get you some more information on that. Now, why would you want to specify Ecoscape Plus Parking if you were a civil engineer and you were working on a project? As you can see, there's a video here that shows the overall process. But basically, what we're trying to do is we're trying to achieve, really three or four things on every project. We want to help you reduce your impervious surface area. We want to help you shrink the size of your stormwater retention system, and we want to increase the size of your income producing square footage. Now, typically what you'll see predominantly when you're speccing out a permeable concrete parking is you'll have a situation to where you have a certain size building and you have to have a certain amount of parking spaces, but you don't have the ability or the land for the stormwater retention system that you need to hit your numbers. So what we'll do is we'll replace the parking spaces that are impervious with a permeable concrete parking space. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to allow us, for every square foot of permeable parking spaces we install, it's going to allow us to shrink the size of our bioretention up to 5%. Now, by doing that, early on in the design process, I can actually, by shrinking the size of my bioretention, by replacing my parking with impervious and converting it to permeable, I can then do a few things. I can add additional parking spaces to help me hit my numbers for my occupancy permit. Or area that I was going to traditionally had carved out and set aside for retention systems could now be additional square footage that I can generate more income on if I'm leasing the building to a client or a tenant, or it could be if you're building a building and it's build to suit and it's for you, that additional square footage could be used to increase the amount of income that you're generating in your manufacturing process. Another thing that we really like is the ability to reduce your stormwater development fees and parcel taxes. And I touched on this earlier. We had a project recently, and it was a church, and they were gonna charge them a stormwater development fee. It was about a 30,000 square foot parking area for a church, and it was going to be a impervious concrete parking lot. And the city basically came in and said, okay, we're going to charge you a development fee based on the size of the square footage of your impervious parking area. And we're going to charge you this as a set aside for the stormwater that you will eventually generate throughout the life of the project. So we were able to convert that impervious parking lot and replace it with a permeable parking pavement system that totally eliminated that fee. The other thing that we're starting to see, and we've seen this in LA County actually, they are actually annually going and they are measuring the amount through GIS of your impervious surface area, and they're charging you what they call a stormwater parcel tax. And that tax actually goes to, they say to, help fund programs for managing and processing stormwater. So what we're going and as we're talking to owners and specifiers is we're saying by installing a permeable parking lot, not only are you going to be saving on bioretention, increasing parking spaces, increasing the opportunity for income producing square footage, you're going to save on permitting, you're going to save on stormwater development fees, and you're going to save your client or as the owner stormwater parcel taxes in perpetuity. If I can shrink out my impervious surface area, I can shrink out the amount of development fees and taxes that these municipalities can charge to me. Now, typically what we see when we're looking at a permeable concrete system is you're usually seeing a interlocking permeable concrete paver. And really what that is it's an impervious paver with a area spaced in between the pavers with a filter media that allows water to permeate through. That system is very expensive and it requires a significant sub-base section, and it doesn't offer continuous permeability, so there's issues with clogging and so forth. What we offer is a really a value engineered solution when you compare it to a traditional interlocking permeable concrete paver system that not only offers the project continuous permeability. Wherever there's pavement, there's permeability, but we offer a system that is significantly, from a cost reduction standpoint, of more than half our system compared to a interlocking permeable concrete paver system. So those are basically a few reasons why you want to specify Ecoscape parking. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn the call back over to Austin, and Austin's going to tell you specifically how we solved the problem for a client up in Temecula in the Southern California region right outside of Los Angeles, and he can tell you a little bit more about how we actually solved this problem for a client. Austin?
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate it. Yeah, so just to go over what Charlie's already mentioned, what the Ecoscape process truly is, and you see that a little bit in the video on the last slide, is this is just a thing we have up on our website, but you can it helps you understand what the process shows a little bit more. So here's an optional base rock that you can put in. My apologies. Base rock that you can put in, and you can actually design that to store water underneath your pavement if you have a low infiltration rate soil or you need to hold water for something else. So we start out by throwing a base rock down. You can compact that, and then you top it with item B, which is generally a 3/8 inch standard concrete washed aggregate. That can be compacted down depending on the application. And then showing here is just our spray applied slurry system. So we actually have cement, a proprietary admix that mixes together, and water. That's all it is. It's no polymers, nothing that's UV degradable, no additional things that are going to contaminate the aquifer. It is all cement based, and that is through our proprietary chemical. It is reduced to a really low viscosity. It almost looks like a melted milkshake when you're spraying it out, that goes over the rock and soaks through. Now it soaks through all the way through this top layer and binds all of those rocks together. And then after the spray process is complete, depending on the application, we will put a vapor barrier on top of that to hold that moisture in so the cement can properly hydrate, cure, and actually be a very strong pavement once the process is complete. So you can even do with this process traditional pervious concrete or any other concrete. Once it is in the truck, it is in the truck. You can potentially add a little bit of water here or there, but once it's out of the truck, there's nothing you can do to modify that pavement. If it's a bad mix, it's a bad mix, and it either has to be turned around or ripped out at a later point in time. So what we can actually do is we spray our first coat down. You can get the finish exactly like you want it. You can let that set, and then you can actually spray a second anti-ravel coat of slurry on the top. So you get a really strong paste bridge that prevents these parking lots from raveling as traditional pervious concrete often does. So this is something that is completely revolutionary. No one else in the world has the ability to do this. So back to the case study Charlie was mentioning, we actually had a client. They had a build-to-suit building, and they went ahead and maximized the capacity of this lot to its full potential. They had a very large building, as small a parking section as they could, and as small a truck docks in the rear as they could. And it was, 90-95% concrete all the way around the property. And in order to do that, they actually had to put in, this is actually at the start of the project, they had to put in this massive retention basin. This ended up being about 15 feet deep and 15 feet wide before being filled with the additional media. What that required is an additional retaining wall to be built here, and it even had to have handrails on it for fall prevention. So they had this whole thing designed to maximize utilization of the entire property. Now, before you can get your permitting processes or permitting for occupancy, you have to have a set number of parking spaces for the building size in order to meet your municipal requirements. The initial design had zero pervious concrete or permeable concrete, and the impervious surface and bioretention systems were maximized. So unfortunately, as they got close to completion and were starting to put pavement in, there was a design change as the utilities said, hey, we can't run our utilities underneath this bioswale section in the front, because if they need to be maintained, what happens if there's water in them? So they actually had to shrink their bioretention basins. And what that did is it means that their stormwater calculations no longer balanced. They'd already put all their design, the building was already built. They'd already designed all of their parking. They had to shrink their biobasin. Now what could they do? There was no other option, or no option at that point in time, that was not going to make them or allow them to get their permits. So what we ended up doing, I'll show you the actual plans for the building here. As you can see in that photo, this was that street you saw on the left side, continues down to this page, left side again. And this is the bioswale that you could see that I pointed out right here and right here. So what they ended up having to do is actually they shrunk their bioswale right here. So they cut out that section. It was going to go all the way to the driveway on the top side, and they cut out this section. It was going to go all the way to the driveway on the bottom side. And in order to make the stormwater calculations balance, they decided to take just over 6,000 square feet of parking spaces, all these spaces here, and all the parking spaces on the front of the building, and actually turn them into Ecoscape Plus Parking permeable pavement. So what that allowed this client to do is take a situation where there was really no other option and add the Ecoscape process into there. So biobasin had to be shrunk. Everything else was already built and in place. And we were able to come in and at minimal additional cost and minimal additional grading, we were able to install a permeable parking space. So now any water that falls onto those permeable spaces no longer runs into that biobasin, which had to be shrunk, but it actually soaks straight through the pavement, sits on the subgrade until it eventually infiltrates into the soil and eventually filters and repopulates the aquifer. So now we have a system where the entire building was already there. Our numbers now balance. We were basically the only solution they had for this opportunity. So final result here, through our spray process and finishing process, we were able to get all these parking stalls installed, minimal delays on the project, permitting all approved. that building is up and operational now. Charlie?
Thank you so much, Austin. And we want to thank you guys for joining us today for our Make the Case for Ecoscape Parking. If you have any questions, you can reach out to Austin or myself. Our emails are here on the screen. You can also visit our website at ecoscapepavement.com. And if you're interested in getting samples or you have a project that you're working on and you think Ecoscape parking would be a solution to your problem, please feel free to reach out. And we look forward to seeing you again on our next Make the Case with Ecoscape. And we thank you for joining us. Have a great day.